Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to highintensitybusiness.com. This is episode 307, and today's topic is a controversial one: 10 reasons not to start a high-intensity training business. To help me on this topic is Discover Strength CEO and founder, Luke Carlson. Luke, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lawrence. It's always my pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine. Great to have you back. So should we start with the theme? And we've got 10 points here, but do you want to just talk about the theme? We'll start there.
So I think an overarching theme is if you love being a personal trainer, if you love high intensity training, if you love being a resistance exercise professional and you're really good at it, you don't need to start a business to have just a great career, right? One guy that embodies this is Steve Wetzel, who was my mentor. He was the head strength coach for the Minnesota Vikings and the Arizona Cardinals for the better part of 2 decades. And he had plenty of money to start a business, to open an unbelievably stunning studio. And he didn't. He went to a couple different private health clubs, and he's been at one health club now for over 10 years. And it's beautiful. And he makes, well into the 6 figures. He's the top producing trainer in that club system. And there's a lot of clubs in that system. And he just does a wonderful job. And it doesn't mean just personal trainer. There's other ways you can work in your passion of high intensity training and evidence-based training where you don't need to open a business. It could be James Fisher and James Steele, who your listeners are very similar with, or very familiar with. They're working in an industry that they love, but it doesn't mean they had to open a business. And so I just think that we've somehow been fooled into thinking that the only way forward is that we're supposed to open a business to live out this passion. And I just don't think that's true.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's great that we're talking about other options people can explore. And I think this podcast is really going to help people qualify themselves in or out if high intensity training entrepreneurship is for them or not. So I'm excited to do this. So let's start with number 1. You said, so just for everyone listening, Luke sent me 10 bullets, which we're going to kind of discuss. If you don't enjoy human interaction, this doesn't mean you have to be extroverted. You just need to care deeply about human connections and relationships. Isn't that the same for any form of personal training, whether you're a business owner or employee? That one.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this one could almost be, hey, if you don't enjoy human interaction, you probably shouldn't be a personal trainer in general. And I put it on here because we come across so many candidates that are coming out of college that are passionate about exercise science and muscle fibers and motor units. And frankly, you had a lot of these types of people, actual exercise scientists, academics on your podcast over the years. And frankly, they don't get excited about human interaction, and they should not be training people all the time. They should be, in an office or in a laboratory doing some research and writing and editing papers and getting papers published. So you have to think, do I love exercise? Do I love biomechanics and motor units and muscle fibers? Or do I actually love interacting with humans? Because that's what we're doing at the end of the day, is we are interacting with humans. I think you have to have both to a degree. You need to love working with humans.
Yeah. And I guess as an entrepreneur, you're going to be interacting with clients, but then also your team, potential business partners, other people that have interests in the business, so you're going to be interacting with all sorts of different kinds of people. So if that's not something that you enjoy, building those relationships, then that's probably a good filter or a good litmus test, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So that one's pretty straightforward. So number 2, you don't want or aren't comfortable selling a lot, selling customers, selling ideas, selling your business plan.
Yeah. Lawrence. But by the way, when I sent these to you, it's your show, so you can be in charge. I should probably walk through them because these are just kind of notes. And so you reading them is probably not the best approach. Because this is just a lot of scribble here. But yeah, number 2 is you should not open a hit business if you aren't comfortable with selling. And this is true of all businesses. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you are going to sell, and that's all you're going to do for many, many years. You're going to sell customers. You're going to sell your ideas. You're going to sell your business plan for some financing early on. All you're going to do is sell. And if you don't get excited about selling, then you should not move into a high intensity training business. This is I'm going to say this multiple times, but it might be the most important of these 10 is it is a life of constant selling.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of trainers in particular really hate sales, right? So this is another really good litmus test.
I totally agree. And all the data says most trainers actually hate sales. They don't have any training on it. They don't have any interest in it. And so that's a problem. And I was listening to a podcast early this morning of a woman who started a cosmetics line and sold it for $1 billion. And she was talking about how you have to want to sell so much, where you feel like if you don't sell what you've created, you are actually doing a disservice to the person across from you. If I don't try to sell you on this, Lawrence, I'm depriving you of something that would value or benefit you so much. And that's it. If you don't feel that way about your product or service, you probably shouldn't start a HIT business. And by the way, the beauty of what we do is most HIT practitioners do believe that second part, right? That people do need this. And I would be depriving you if I didn't actually talk you through it and try to sell you on it.
Do you think an important distinction here, though, is trainers that don't understand, or people that don't understand sales, versus when they do understand and realizing that it's not this like manipulative tactic, that it's actually a way of helping someone be better off and solving their problems? Do you think once they're educated and they can make that distinction, that can be the difference, and actually they might even develop an enjoyment for selling?
Potentially, I still think some of it's hardwired, and I think some of it's ego. So even people that are good at sales, after they've built bigger businesses, they say, well, my ego is too big now to get back into starting a new business where I have to be in nonstop sales mode, because sales involves rejection. And once you've had a degree of success, it's hard to be rejected. And I think about this with anyone who's had professional success. It's hard to have professional success, pivot to some entrepreneurial venture, and then get used to getting turned down. So let's take an academic. An academic is, a lot of academics have a degree of professional success, and their students come to see them just during office hours. And there's this, not a cloak around them, but it's hard to actually interact with them, right? There's a little bit of distance between them and the student or the practitioner. And then if they pivoted to actually working in a business or running a business or owning a business, it would be really tough on their ego to say, I now have to sell nonstop and I'm going to get rejected. I'm used to doing the rejecting, right? So I think your ego has to be prepared for that.
Yeah, that's something that's going to come up in one of the later points, which we'll get into a bit more. Do you want to go on to the next point?
Yeah, so I think the third reason that you should not start a HIT business is if you're not willing to commit to learning more about business. So this is sales, marketing, management, leadership, customer experience, finance. If you don't want to read books and read articles and attend conferences on all of these things, I just don't think you should do it. And I had a great mentor tell me, Joe Cirilli told me when I was 23 years old, he's like, hey, you know a lot about exercise, but someone in your business needs to know a lot about business. So you're going to have to start learning and reading about business. And I got lucky that I happened to like learning and reading about those aforementioned topics, right? I was into all of it. But if you're not into all of it, you should not do it, because your success is going to be 80% on how much you know about sales, marketing, management, leadership, customer experience, and finance, and 20% on how much you know about exercise. And so if you're not willing to make that time commitment, that effort commitment in the learning about the business side, then I don't think it's a great option for you. Now, again, I'm going to say it multiple times. It's a wonderful career, but you just shouldn't own the business, because you're doing a disservice to all of your employees. And they're going to look around and say, the guy that runs, the woman that runs this business doesn't know anything about business, nor are they really interested in learning about business. So you have to be willing to go deep on the business side of your business.
This is a bit of a delicate follow-up, but do you think this is a problem among current studio owners, a lack of interest in the business side of things?
Probably, and it probably stems, it's not germane only to, high intensity training businesses. It's Michael Gerber wrote a book about it, right? The E-Myth, the entrepreneurial seizure that you have, that I'm really good at baking bread, I should probably own a bakery. And you realize I don't really like owning the bakery, and I don't like learning about the business. I just liked I liked baking the bread. And that applies to the chiropractor and the baker and the personal trainer. Maybe you shouldn't own the business. You should just do the work that you really, really care about. So I definitely think it impacts hit studio operators right now. Now, let me make sure I mention this caveat as we walk through these 10. When I came up with these, Lawrence, I tried to make sure none of them applied to me personally, right? I didn't want this list to be 10 things that, that indicate what my DNA is all about. I tried to look at the whole landscape of entrepreneurship and high intensity training entrepreneurship. So I didn't just pick the things that are inverse to what I'm interested in, right? So there's a lot of things that I say this all the time. There's a lot of ways to win, right? There's a lot of ways that you can grow a wonderfully successful business. We do not have to do it the same way, which is awesome. So none of this list is about me. I don't think you can really grow a great business if you don't become interested in business. And that's going to apply to all 10 of these, is they're not germane to me.
Yeah, thanks for the clarity. One thing I wanted to sort of discuss about this point, and maybe it's a caveat, is you get a lot of people in our space who are running quote unquote lifestyle businesses, right? Like they're the only trainer, they're doing quite well, they're doing like quite a large volume of sessions, and maybe they don't have a desire to grow beyond that. And would you say that they might be an exception to this rule a little bit, in that they're probably not always that well versed in these different aspects of business, and yet they've got this nice lifestyle business and they're happy with that? So does it apply more if you're looking to grow a business and hire people and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great caveat. I think are you getting what you want to from your business? And if you asked so many business owners in all different industries, okay, in a moment of vulnerability, are you getting from your business what you want to get from your business? If the answer is yes, then maybe you don't need to go deeper on these things. I think the reality is that about 5% of business owners would say, I'm getting from my business what I want to get from my business. And what do we mean? We mean the work-life balance. We mean the financial success. We mean the enjoyment of the actual work itself, right? So it's all of the things that you could possibly get from the business. If you're getting all those things, then you probably don't need to go deeper on this.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay, so point number 4.
So I think the fourth reason you would not start a hit business is if you are not completely comfortable signing the front of a check, but not the back of the check. So what that means is if you're not comfortable not getting paid for quite a while, and you're paying either other people or you are writing checks for operating your business, if you're not comfortable doing that, you shouldn't start the business, right? If you are used to being employed and having a check that comes in every couple of weeks, it's going to be a big transition for you when there is no money coming in. And this is very true for hit businesses, but this is true for all entrepreneurs, that you got to be ready to not get paid and to continue to write checks. So this means a couple of things. One, you have to be okay from an ego standpoint, not getting paid. You can't get mad at the end of an 80-hour work week and say, not only did I not get paid, I paid other people, other vendors, etc. That's number one. And number two, do you have enough capital? Do you have working capital, or do you have enough money in the bank where you can live for a while and your family is not, just massively impacted, and your lifestyle is not impacted in a way that you can't handle? So I had the mistaken thought that when I started a business, I remember going on a run. There's an area in Minneapolis where I live where all the beautiful homes around the lakes are. I would go on a run and I think, I'm going to start this business soon, and I'll probably buy one of those homes in the first few months. What will it be like to live in one of these mansions after I start a business? And I didn't realize that, as Jim Collins says, most overnight successes are usually 10 years in the making, right? That it just doesn't work that way. I was going to be poverty stricken for quite a while. And you could argue that I'm overstating some of that. I just think you have to be prepared to work your tail off and not get paid early on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's funny the way you wrote it, not comfortable signing the front but not the back of the check. I don't know whether it's because I'm a millennial and I rarely ever use checks, but that totally just went straight over my head. I was like, what the hell does that mean? Obviously the brackets help. You will not get paid at first. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously, I think it is true for a lot of entrepreneurial endeavors. I think it's less true for like online businesses where you can actually turn a profit much quicker. But I think it's definitely relevant to high intensity training studio.
And the reason is for high intensity training studio, right, is there's just more capital expenditure involved, right? You have to, first of all, you have to sign a lease generally. You have to buy some equipment. So there's expenses before there's any revenue.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so point number 5.
So the fifth reason I think you maybe should not start a high intensity training business is if you're not comfortable with public failure. So part of this is if you're risk averse, but when I say failure, I mean public failure. There's so many failures in life that we can essentially disguise, right? Well, I decided that law school wasn't for me. Well, really what you meant was you bombed the LSAT and you didn't get into law school, but that's not public. You just said law school wasn't for me. And this is kind of what we do, right? Well, when your business fails, it is going to be really public. The business was open for 3 years and it is no longer open and everyone's going to know it. Are you okay with that? I mean, this is a hit business we're talking about, but I think of all of these 10, this is the one that applies to entrepreneurship. The great entrepreneurs, and let me be really, really clear right now, I have never considered myself an entrepreneur or a great entrepreneur. So this is something I can't relate to, but the great entrepreneurs have to be willing to launch something, have it fail, and then start over again. And it's going to be really public when you do fail. So I think we should be completely comfortable with this public failure. If you're risk averse, this is just not the right path forward for you. On a risk-adjusted basis, you will make much more money. You will be financially much better off if you just go to work for a decent-sized company than if you are an entrepreneur. And that's in every space. That's not just in high-intensity training. So the path forward to financial success in at least North America is not entrepreneurship. It's working for a decent-sized company. So if that's what you're taking, go work for a decent-sized company.
Yeah. This is interesting. And, I can say I've had tons of failures. Like in my 20s, I had 5, 6, 7, 8 failed online businesses before I really landed on Corporate Warrior, which became high intensity business. And I it's funny because I look back at my 20s and that's all I did. Like I did party and I did, I had a career and I had some relationships, but it was mostly an obsession with trying to figure this out. Right. And obviously still trying to figure it out now, but in a much better place. I know that people listening to this want to know about your failures, Luke, and in relation to this point. Can you tell us any stories where you've had failures that remind everyone that you're human?
Yeah, I mean, I've had plenty of failures. I think no one in the history of the University of Minnesota took longer to complete a graduate degree than I did. So a master's degree in exercise physiology is supposed to take 2 years. And I took from the time I started it in 2002 and I finished it in 2011. And they basically said, hey, if you don't finish this by December, you're done. I don't care that you spent whatever, $60,000 or $50,000 on it, you will not get a degree. And of course I have excuses and alibis, right? I started the business during that time. I stopped taking courses. I took a course every now and then. And it just wasn't a priority. But I, was in an office of people looking at me like, you don't have your stuff together and you got to do this, right? And then when I defended that thesis that I wrote on the cardiometabolic benefits of strength training, my panel was 3 physicians. I mean, 3 MDs, and they peppered me for 3 hours with questions on this. And I felt like a total failure because there was so much that I had learned that was literally 7, 8 years ago that I didn't remember. They were asking me questions on the physiology of hyperglycemia and type 2 diabetes that I just frankly couldn't remember. And so I definitely felt like a failure there. So yeah, I have quite a few failures.
Yeah. And also what about in terms of micro failures, like within Discover Strength? I mean, you've told me before how you've tried so many different marketing campaigns and they haven't worked out, or they've obviously still managed to really successfully grow the business. Can you touch on any, I know this is dragging this point out, but I just think it's really interesting to hear about some of the failures you've had internally in the business.
Well, the beauty of those is sometimes those are not as public public, right? Like no one knows the first quarter last year,
Yeah,
we
that's
spent
true.
more money than we've ever spent in our life to market one location, right? We were going to learn. We took our downtown Minneapolis location and we poured more money into one quarter than we've really ever spent in a quarter across all of our locations, or a year, in a full year in one location. We said, we're going to grow this location by spending money on marketing. And number two, we're going to learn in the process. We're going to find out what works and what doesn't by really spending money. And it was an abysmal failure. And then at the end of that quarter, by the way, COVID hit, and it was just in all ways, it was just purely wasted money. So that's one. I've had multiple failures with people. I went out and recruited. I mean, we went through over 250 candidates, and I took Hannah's position, our vice president of sales and marketing, and we split it. And she was the vice president of sales, and I went out and recruited a vice president of marketing, and an unbelievable human being, really, really smart, great track record, but just wasn't the right fit for us. And they stayed with us for less than a year, and I ended the employment. It was the day after Christmas 2 years ago now. And I mean, that was a failed experiment. And believe me, I'd read every book. I knew how to recruit an executive, and I knew how to interview, and I knew how to make sure they were a cultural fit and onboard them. And it didn't work out. And that's 100% on me. So, and then a lot of our other failures are people. I've had wonderful trainers and wonderful people in the business that have left the business, and I've had to have lawsuits against former employees. I mean, that just happened once, and I used to think that stuff would never happen if you were a good person, and if you were of high integrity and you were a good communicator, you were going to avoid all those things. And the reality is you're not going to avoid those things. So as I went through all those things, those felt like failures. I had the most horrific, what's been described to me by my attorney and by every colleague I have, as the most difficult business separation that they've ever seen. I mean, my attorney said this. He's been practicing law for 25 or 30 years. I mean, it was a brutal business separation. And so that was a failure. And it wasn't completely public, but people that were close to me definitely knew about it. And so yeah, we could do a 3-hour podcast on failures within
Luke's failures.
Yeah. And a lot of those failures, what do they really damage, right? They might damage your profit margin for the year. They might impact the mojo of the business, the culture of the business potentially, but they will absolutely wreak havoc on your own ego, your sense of self-worth, your own confidence. And so, if there's one trait that an entrepreneur needs, is they need to be able to regenerate confidence, right? If you can't wake up the next day and have a sense of confidence and move forward, even though you have bullets flying at you from every direction, this is not the right path forward for you, right?
Yeah. And
when I say confidence, you have to have confidence while also maintaining humility. So when I say confidence, I don't mean you say, I've never made a mistake and I have this huge ego and I charge forward no matter what. You have to have these incredible moments of humility where you understand that it is me, it is my fault. I have failed. I'm not good at this, but I still have the confidence to know that I need to keep moving forward, and I do have some strengths. So it's not that you ignore those other things and you create a false reality or perception about yourself. It's you have to sit with those things. You have to sit with your inadequacies while still having the confidence to move forward. And that right there is where everyone gets paralyzed and you're just caught in a quicksand. And if you had every person that's ever been on your show that's an entrepreneur, okay, so not an academic, they would tell you their story of where they're caught in between that. We're always caught in between that to a degree.
Yeah. And like you're saying, if you've got the right character, then whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Which is the upside of these things happening, and they will happen. And I think that's the point of us elaborating on this point, is it is absolutely inevitable that you will have this kind of strife and conflict and failure if you start a high intensity training business, or any business for that matter. So you have to be aware of that up front and be prepared to face those head on when they come about. Good. All right. Okay, let me see here. Okay, so let's go to number 6.
Yeah, so I think the 6th reason you wouldn't start a hit business is if you don't love it and live it and breathe it. And by it, I mean high intensity training, right? I think so. There's different schools of thought on this, on passion, right? Steve Jobs says if you don't have passion, you got to get out of it. You need passion to be successful, right? Scott Galloway, who's one of my favorite authors, who's a professor at NYU, he says, forget passion. You do not need passion, because as soon as you get good at anything, you'll develop passion for the fact that you're good at it. No one's really passionate about accounting, but you're passionate about the respect that you earn from your colleagues and the lifestyle that it gives you, et cetera, et cetera. He says, anyone that's ever spoken at a graduation, and given the commencement speech and says, follow your passion. He's like, that's bullshit. They've left 6 other businesses and they finally, became incredibly wealthy, running a waste management business, which was not their passion early on, right? So anyone that tells you to follow their passion, he says, is already rich. So there's a lot of schools of thought on it. I think you got to be passionate about it. It's so easy for us to be passionate about what we do, but you got to live it. You got to breathe it. You got to love it. And the reason I say that, and the reason Steve Jobs would say that, is you're going to struggle at some point, right? And if you wake up 7 years from now and you say, I don't really care about high intensity strength training anymore, I don't think you're going to be successful. You have to have it be a constant in your life. You have to wake up every day and care about it and know that it's really, really important. And frankly, I think this is probably not a huge issue for most of your listeners, because most of your listeners are really, really passionate about it.
Yeah, I do agree with much of what you say. I think that maybe there's some caveats, and I'm thinking of the investors in our space. Those people who might choose to buy a Discover Strength franchise and have someone else run it. So is that the exception if you're looking at this more from a
I'm so glad you asked that, because as I typed this out, I thought, well, what about people that want to buy? And we have a number of them that want to buy a Discover Strength franchise and look at it as an investment. But the second that thought even came up, I said, no, these people are still passionate about the workouts. I mean, frankly, they're more consistent with their workouts. We have a lot of clients that are interested in buying the franchise, and they've made millions in other businesses, and they're more passionate about their workouts, I think, than a lot of my trainers are. And my trainers are really passionate about their workouts because it's changed their own life, and it's changed their life for years and years and years. And they're more consistent with their workouts than even some of my trainers are. So I think you might not be passionate about delivering the workout, but you got to be passionate about the impact of high intensity training. I had one franchise candidate who runs a massive used car business and an aftermarket car business. So like every professional athlete in this city, after they buy their massive, whatever Range Rover, Cadillac Escalade, and they get it souped up, this guy's business does it. He also owns the bank that provides financing for all the cars he sells. Wonderful entrepreneur. His father was a wonderful entrepreneur. And he said to me in a peer executive group, or to our whole group, he said, let's be honest, there's only one business in this whole room that actually makes a difference. And that's Luke's business, right? And I actually don't agree with that. I think you can be in a lot of different businesses and make a difference. But when he said that, I'm like, okay, this guy gets it, right? He's got the passion for understanding what high intensity training is all about and the impact that it has, et cetera.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was so interesting. So you're saying there, if you, because I know of some individuals who started a hit business or bought a franchise or whatever, and then they've appointed someone to run it and actually grow the business, manage the systems, all the rest of it. But you still think that original owner, that original investor, has to be passionate about this?
Yeah, if one of our owners, investors, if we found out they were in CrossFit class, 2 years down the road, I would drive directly to the CrossFit class or drive directly to their home and say, we have to have a difficult conversation because it's over now, right? One of the most important sentences we teach in our first day of employment is, and we didn't come up with it, it comes from a wonderful book called How to Win Customers and Keep Them for Life. The sentence is this: the greatest customer is you. And then we read through the whole thing. I have it on a slide. The greatest customer is you. And after we read through the whole thing, I turn to all the new employees. I go, who is the greatest customer? And they say, well, you. I know, no, who is you? And they finally say, well, it's me. And me might be Lindsay, just went through this last week. It's me. I said, yes. If you don't buy into the product or service yourself, if you're not passionate about it, you will never be able to sell to someone else, right? If you're going to work at Apple's corporate headquarters in Cupertino, California, and you show up with a Samsung phone, right? you don't belong there. And it's not that there's anything wrong with the Samsung phone, but the greatest customer is you. You have to be into it as much as any consumer. I mean, more than any consumer. So I think an investor can do that.
Yeah, that was a great clarification. I love that. All right, number 7.
You shouldn't open a hit business if you don't like developing and writing systems and processes. And this is early on, but this is on an ongoing basis. This is the most important work that you're going to do is write systems and write processes. So this is taking time in your day and just stopping and writing down everything that you're doing in your workout so that your other trainers, the other people in your business can execute in a similar way that you do. And how evolved these are will change. Like my current staff they mistakenly think that we didn't have systems 15 years ago. They think we only had systems when we started Traction, right? Like 7, 8 years ago. And I'm like, no, are you kidding me? I had our whole employee manual, our handbook, all of this typed out a full 6 months before we ever started the business. 1, because I had too much time on my hands. And 2, I had, read Michael Gerber, and I knew that you needed to have all this stuff documented. So I was into it. So I just wrote it all the time. Then as we started, I needed to adjust these things and change these things over time. And they definitely evolved over time. And there's no one great way to do it. If you're into the book, The Checklist Manifesto, do it that way. If you want traction, do it that way. If you want the E-Myth, you can do it that way. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but you have to be into writing systems and writing processes. It can't be in your head.
Yeah, I read that, and there's a lot of points here I kind of read as an affirmation. I think it really affirmed my decision personally to start a studio, because I don't know about you, Luke, but I absolutely love writing systems. Like, it's so nerdy, but it's like to know that I can establish something and then do it once and then potentially never have to do it again, and then have other people or other pieces of software or some sort of automation do it for me. It's like really exciting. Like it's this kind of like focus on trying to have max leverage you can have, because ultimately then you're going to have the biggest impact. I mean, that is very much my goal with the studio. And Sean's my business partner. We're very much on the same page. Like, he said to me, Lawrence, you need to get off the floor as quickly as possible. And I was like, well, hold on a minute, Sean. I've come to realize there's a ton I need to learn about personal training, and I need to at least invest a fair amount of time here, and then maybe transition to something like you where I do less, but I continue doing it in order to build a system, because obviously that is the business. That's everything. But the point is that we're kind of on the same page in that I need to kind of remove myself over time to create the systems. It's the same thing I'm doing with high intensity business, with the online business. It's like, I want to do as least stuff as possible so I could just focus on unique ability and and do work that I enjoy the most, right? You always talk about the 4-box matrix. Is it the Eisenhower matrix? I can't remember if it's that.
I've never heard that name, but
yeah, it's like, it's well, I won't. I'll link to the list. We won't go through now, but I'll link to somewhere for the listeners to check that out. But yeah, it's I just want to say I read that and I was like, yeah, that's bang on. Like, I really resonates with me. So okay, so point number 8.
I don't think you should start a hit business if you're not passionate about growing or developing other personal trainers. So in my opinion, we're getting to more and more important elements as we continue. I think they're all important, but they're getting more important. I think if you want to grow a business that's going to be lucrative, you're going to need other personal trainers. And if you're not passionate about growing them, then you should not own the business. You should work in the business. You should be a personal trainer. And that's awesome. That's exactly what you should. And by the way, you don't have to be a personal trainer. You should work in a business of some kind. You should be a strength and conditioning coach. You should be an academic. You should be a personal trainer. You should not own the business, because your main focus becomes developing other personal trainers. And I had the understanding really early on. It was inspired by Zig Ziglar. Zig Ziglar famously said, you can get anything you want to out of life if you help enough other people get what they want to out of life. And I also realized, and I've said this on your podcast before, that I realized real quickly that nobody wanted to work for me, right? No one wanted to be like my assistant, my helper, they wanted it to be about them. And so if I didn't come up with a system or a structure where they were the star of the show, and they were the ones that customers were really, really excited about working with, that I was going to fail. So the passion has to be for growing and developing other trainers. If the greatest compliment you could ever receive is, and this needs to be the greatest compliment you could ever receive, is a client tells you that the trainer they're working with now, one of your trainers, is better than you are, that's the compliment that you want, right? If your ego is still attached to the fact that you're the best trainer, you're going to be in trouble, right? You better be able to produce trainers that are better than you. That's got to be where the passion is.
This is actually such an interesting point, because maybe this is a sub point or an additional point, but I personally hate my ego being sort of front and center, or me being front and center in my business. HighIntensityBusiness.com, the website, is very much about me, which actually I don't like. And I'm going to have that changed, because I want it to be about the prospect, about the customer, about the high intensity training business owner, very much kind of story brand alignment. So I'm probably going to make a change there, because I can't stand this focus on me. And ultimately, I think if you're focused on the client or your team, you're going to be way more successful anyway. So that's kind of a aside. But I wanted to say, I think one of the things I see, and maybe you see this too, is a lot of our colleagues simply do not have plans for their trainers. At DS, you have this wonderful tier system, which is so cool. And I read that and I was like, I want to go work for Discover Strength. And it's like, really clear criteria on how your staff can earn promotions and better compensation. And it's really motivating. And I just think a lot of our colleagues lack that kind of career path for their trainers. So that's ultimately going to make it more difficult to attract high quality candidates and retain great trainers, right? So would you agree with that?
So yeah, absolutely, I agree. You fast forwarded to the tier system we have and this core growth plan of how you're developing people over the next 10 years. That is absolutely true, but it's also even how you onboard a trainer. If you're not excited about spending the time with that person and onboarding them and getting them up to speed, you're not going to be successful, right? So growing and developing means over the entire employment experience, from early on and it's learning, but it's creating raises, it's being pushed, it's being managed. I mean, we flew in a candidate yesterday. His flight landed yesterday morning. David picked him up at the airport, took him through a workout, took him to lunch, and just kind of hung out with him. This was his fourth interview of our 4-interview process, and the fourth interview was a workout interview, so we had to fly in. And he said, ultimately, what I want is I've reached my limit with my current employer. I want to be pushed. I want someone to manage me. I want someone to demand more from me. So when I say you have to grow and develop personal trainers, it's all of those things. It's teaching them, it's providing the raises, it's providing the structure, it's providing the culture of learning, but it's actually placing demands on someone, saying, I think you're doing B work right now, and I think you're capable of A work.
And probably useful to say that Luke and I recorded 2 podcast series on how to attract and retain trainers, and I'll link to that from the post for this, because if you're hearing this and you're like, I need to have an onboarding plan, I need to have a career growth plan, then that will help you set that up. Okay, so number 9.
If you lack focus. Jim Flanagan taught me a long time ago, there's 3 key words to being successful. And I didn't realize how magical, how incredibly important this was when he told me. He said, it's 3 things. It's commitment, meaning you have to decide, this is what I want to do. I am now committed to it. Number 2, preparation. You got to do the homework. You have to actually prepare. And preparation is like an ongoing thing. It means do the homework forever. And the last one is focus. So focus means you can't take your eye off the business. You can't, in my opinion, move away. You can't start a side hustle. You can't be distracted by shiny things. You need to be insanely focused on the business. There's so many manifestations of lack of focus. It is, I'm starting another business. It's, we're starting another revenue stream within our business. It's, I'm going to have somebody else run the business. I'm going to take a step back and focus on some other things. Those other things might be really important. It literally might be your family, which is incredibly important. But you have to be focused on the business for the long haul. This is true of all businesses. It's incredibly true of the high intensity training business. You should not get into it if you lack just an absolute laser focus. And sometimes focus manifest itself as a boring, maniacal focus, right? You have to be a little bit boring. This is all we deal with. I'm talking about and thinking about the same things today as I was 15 years ago, right? It's walking into a studio and caring about the fact that I saw a poor rep. Oh my gosh, we had a trainer allow a sloppy rep. And it's one thing if a client does a sloppy rep, but it's another thing if the trainer doesn't even say anything. That's bad. I mean, I stressed out about that 15 years ago. I lost sleep over it 15 years ago. I lost sleep over it last night. And the only difference is now I'm wearing an Oura ring and I know that I slept 5 hours and 5 minutes last night, losing sleep over it. So the moral of the story is not that we can't sleep. It's we have to stay laser focused on the business over time in order to be successful.
Yeah, I completely agree with that one. Maintaining that focus over a long period of time and being really disciplined about it. And I think it might be important to say that occasionally you might have a lapse in focus, but as long as you're prepared to kind of realign and check back in and get refocused, I think that's fine. I think it's just knowing up front that you're going to be very laser focused on a single thing for a long period of time. And so are you prepared to do that?
If you look at the struggles in our industry and in our businesses, like in our niche, if you wrote the business case study and published it in Harvard Business Review and it was taught in business school, almost every struggle or failure is linked back to when the entrepreneur had a temporary lack of focus. And there's really valid reasons why they lacked focus. Someone got sick in the family, right? There was a new entrepreneurial opportunity that someone needed to take advantage of. There was a relationship issue, the change in relationship dynamic. A lot of these are really valid reasons. And some of them are actually ambitious reasons. I wanted to start something else. I had a new opportunity over here. But there's always a lack of focus involved in the struggle or the failure.
How do you deal with that yourself? Because you've got DS, you've got Resistance Exercise Conference, you've got private speaking that you do, and potentially other things that I'm not even aware of. Like, how do you reconcile that with your own situation?
So I know every day when I wake up what my main thing is, right? And to paraphrase Stephen Covey, can you keep the main thing, right? Everyone on my leadership team knows that I could care less about being a good speaker. I care about being good at running Discover Strength. I just booked yesterday a trip to the Grand Canyon to run rim to rim. So it's running 44 miles across the canyon and back, and I'm excited about that trip. What I was saying is I like to run marathons and like to run. That is not important to me relative. Like, I know what the main thing is. And I guess the lucky part is when I wake up each morning, I'm excited about the main thing still. So I do some of these other things, and I'm trying to have a more balanced life in general, but I still know that what's my identity? Not just as a human being, but what is my focus? Where do I need to get my, the professional success that I could potentially experience? I know where it needs to come from. It needs to come from Discover Strength success. Jim Collins talks about the level 5 leader. So the level 5 leader is two things. It's personal humility, meaning you are a humble human being, with professional will, meaning all of your ambition is for the success of the firm, not your own success. And so for me, I've just rooted in that since I was 24. As I want Discover Strength to be successful, that's where my focus needs to be. I don't need to be successful. I need to stay humble, but I need to make sure Discover Strength is wildly successful.
Yeah, I find that so affirming. Just goes back to what I was saying earlier about ego. It's like, I just honestly, Luke, I could not care less if I was successful, if so long as a studio is successful, and the same with high intensity business. Like, if obviously it's weird because I don't have employees, I just have partners I work with, but if they got all the credit, frankly, I wouldn't care, so I don't know whether that's a DNA thing or whether that's something I've learned, but I think if you don't have that, I think you're going to find this hard, right?
I agree. I'm not sure if it's DNA either, but I think you can read the right things. I mean, you can read Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy, and you can surround yourself with other people that are humble. And I read The Level 5 Leader from Jim Collins, and I thought, okay, this is what I want to embody. And I have to surround myself with it often enough. And every time Jim Collins jumps in a podcast, I got to listen to the podcast because he's going to talk about level 5 leader at some point, and it's going to remind me, and it's going to just throw me back into the mindset of, whoa, I've got away from this, right? I need to embody this. I wrote in my journal this morning, right? 2 daily affirmations in the 5-minute journal. One of them, I'm not going to say what it is. It's the same one every single day. The other one was that I want to be the most, humble person, in the room wherever I am. I want to lead with humility. I want to enter the room with humility. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just want to say, like, I think that manifests itself in every interaction we have. And I always notice that about you. Like, you're always so willing to listen and learn from others. And that's really evident. So, point 10.
So the last one is, I don't think you should start a hit business if you have what's called low C. So what C stands for is capacity. So in traction, Gino Wickman talks about there's 3 things that decide whether or not you're in the right seat, the right job. Do you get it? Do you want it? And do you have the capacity to do it? And it is, whatever the roles of that seat are, right? Get it means, do you intellectually understand it? Do you understand how all the work comes together? And can you do the work? Do you want it means, do you actually want to do this, right? You can't not want to do your job too many days in a row before you realize this is not the right fit. And the last one is capacity. So that's the C, the capacity. Capacity is emotional capacity, physical capacity, intellectual capacity, time capacity, right? So I think you have to be honest with yourself. Do you have the C to run the business? And, when I noticed going to college, no one ever talked about C. No one ever talked about capacity. I wish there was a professor, like in the first day of freshman year, that said, hey, by the way, most of you, you're not going to be successful or failure because of your IQ. I mean, largely it's your EQ, but the main factor is going to be, do you have high or low C? Do you have high or low capacity? Behind me, you can't hear us because this is supposed to be soundproof and he has headphones on, is David, our VP of Finance. He's one of the highest C individuals I've ever met. David can have 300 things on his plate in one day. And by things, I don't just mean the day is longer. I mean, he's got to have a tough conversation with an employee. And then he's got to talk to a new vendor that we're talking about to have an online platform to record all of our training. And then he's got to go right from there to call 4 candidates in a row and tell them they didn't get hired. And then from there, he's got to go in to talk to a vendor about the new floor that we put in. And we're not happy with it. We're going to have to replace it for $30,000 and we want them to pay for it. And then he's got to go from there. So he has a day that is emotionally exhausting. If you have low C, you can't survive his day. We joke all the time that if one of our trainers, and we have great trainers, follow David around for a day, I mean, they would pass out halfway into the day. He's got high C, so he can execute on his job. If you want to run the high intensity training business, I think you need good C. I mean, you have to be able to train 12 clients in a row, 8 clients in a row, right? And then you have to go sit down and look at your QuickBooks and realize, holy cow, things are really struggling. And you look at that for 30 minutes, and then you have to go train 3 more clients. And those clients can't sense the fact that you don't know how you're going to make payroll, at the end of this 2-week period. And so you just need these broad shoulders to be able to handle all of this. And I think that's the key. And my note that I have here, Lawrence, is be honest with yourself, right? If you don't have great capacity, this is going to ruin your life. And in one of the ways capacity manifests itself as things like your mental health, your depression and anxiety and so forth, is you have to get those things figured out, because that's a manifestation of capacity. It's a manifestation of C. You have to be in the right headspace to be able to take on everything that the business is going to ask you to take on.
Yeah. Just to clarify, I think you said David's VP of Ops, right? You said VP of Finance.
Oh, geez, he is definitely not the VP of Finance. Not allowed to manage our.
That's Jessica. Yeah,
he's not even the VP of Finance in his own marriage. He's the VP of Operations. Yes.
Cool. This is interesting because I've basically, during this conversation, I've sort of said how everything's been so reaffirming, but this is the only one, maybe this one in the bonus, which we'll get to if we get time, which is not so reaffirming, because I'll be honest, I've struggled with the workload of a second business, right? When you've got 2 businesses, it is tough trying to organize my time, trying to organize, evenings, mornings and evenings for personal training. Like it's been really challenging and stressful. So I'm still trying to figure that out, but I think I have it. It's just trying to like manage it and tweak it so that I have the capacity for both roles. So go
So I
ahead.
note on that. I want to be respectful and say, if you have actual mental health issues, I think you can, I mean, I'm not a professional. I think you can work through those things and get yourself to a position where your capacity improves. And then Lawrence, to your point, I think our capacity, if you craft it over the course of our career, starts low. It can grow over time. Your capacity is going to be far greater 8 years from now than it is now. And then I think it probably actually declines toward the end of our career, right? When we're 60 years old in the twilight of our career, if that's when the twilight of our career is, we probably can't handle quite as much. And believe me, that's maybe one of the reasons why I'm so complimentary of David is 28 years old and he's got such high capacity. I don't expect the average 28-year-old to have that high capacity. When we hire a 24-year-old, man, their capacity is so incredibly low. So I think learn capacity over time, and I think you can do things to improve your capacity.
Wow, I didn't realize David was that young. Not that he doesn't look young. It's just he comes across so mature. That I thought he was older than me. I'm 34, so am I 34? 33. I'm 34 this year, so had to think about that for a second. All right, so I know we're at time, Luke. Do you have time to just do the bonus quickly?
Yeah, I want to do the bonus and then make one final statement. So I think a bonus, if I had number 11, is you shouldn't open a hit business if you're not interested in working early mornings and evenings and weekends. And this is really germane to the hit business because clients want to train early in the morning, they want to train in the evenings, and they want to train on weekends. So if you want to be the only personal trainer and you don't want to work those times, I think you're going to have a tough time making it work. It doesn't mean that you have to work every morning, every evening, and every weekend, but that is when there's money to be made. You got to be open. You got to be working with clients when there is money to be made. I mean, that is the secret right there. So it is not banker's hours type of business. It's not, I mean, I'm speaking out of turn here because I don't really know Lawrence, but it's not running an online business where you can maybe do a lot of the work when you want to. You got to do the work when the customer wants to be there, which is mornings, evenings, and weekends. Are one of our most profitable days is Sundays, and it has been for 15 years. People are always shocked that we're open on Sundays, and they just say, well, that's when there's money to be made, right? So, and I mean, I go to church on Sundays. Like, I understand for some people, they don't want to be open on Sundays, and I respect that, but you got to be open Saturdays then. And then the closing thing I just have to say is, if you look, Lawrence, at the people that have made the greatest impact in our field, in the world of high intensity training, remember that I don't think any of them owned businesses, right? I think about the icons, right? I think about Wayne Westcott. I think about James Fisher. I think about Ellington Darden and Jim Flanagan. And we can go on and on and on. And they didn't own businesses, right? I mean, Jim Flanagan actually owned a health club, a Nautilus gym, very early on, but most of his career was in sales at Nautilus, right? Doug McGuff is the one guy, yes, he owns a studio. That studio is a tiny bit of what he does, right? He's a physician that has written a couple incredible books that has really impacted everyone. So do not think that you have to own a hit business to really do meaningful work in high intensity training. I think about all my heroes in this space, and none of them own businesses. There's some guys that own businesses that are doing great work, but the iconic names that we all think about, it was not built around the business. I just think that's an important reminder. I actually, struggle with that myself and remind myself that. So don't think that's the only path to impact and fulfillment is actually owning a business.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Great way to close up. And I second what you say about early mornings, weekends, and evenings. That's something I've actually really struggled with. It's so removed from an online business, right, where you're pretty much working whenever you want. That it's so removed that it's like just really strange having to juggle both. And that's definitely been challenging for me. And I'm not doing that on the weekends, and that is obviously a capacity issue or an availability issue if we want to grow the business. So that's something we'll need to address for sure. Luke, this has been awesome. I mean, I always say that when we do a podcast, but this has been just particularly good. And I think if the people listening to this this is really gonna help them make, because I know there's so many people on the fence. I think one of the things we probably didn't address, and sorry, I know you need to shoot off, is should I start a business in 2021 due to COVID? And I think we haven't got time to discuss that now, but if you listen to the recent podcast Luke and I've done towards the end of 2020, you'll hear lots of reasons why you absolutely should start a business, assuming you meet all the criteria we talked about today. And it is a fantastic opportunity. So anyway, with that said, Luke, best way for people to find out more about you?
Yeah, they can just shoot me an email at luke@discoverstrength.com. They can go to discoverstrength.com or discoverstrengthfranchise.com.
Great. And for everyone listening, to find the blog post for this episode, and if you listen to this and you think, actually, despite all of that, I still am very passionate and interested about starting a high intensity training business, then please consider joining HIT Business Membership. And you can find that over at highintensitybusiness.com/membership. And for the links and the show notes for this episode, please go to episode 307 over at highintensitybusiness.com. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.